Welcome to Heart Snuggles. I'm so excited for this special guest today. I brought Jazmin. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi. I'm so grateful and excited to be here. Excited that you even wanted my voice on here. My name is Jazmin Kylene. I am a spiritual counselor. I am a conscious media journalist and also just like a regular journalist. And above all else, like I said before, I'm kind of just like a human being, figuring things out, doing her best, having a good time out loud.
Love it. Love it. And what does a spiritual counselor mean?
So a spiritual counselor it's a healing modality that is sort of in alignment with like what it would mean to go to like a therapeutic counselor, but I implement a lot of like spiritual healing modalities into any of like my sessions, whether it's like a group session on one-on-one, but we work with astrology, we work with cards, we work with breath work, just like any sort of like mindfulness practice that you could use to approach counseling and processing your emotions. So yeah.
Yay, we love that. Processing emotions.
You love that. Absolutely. Vulnerability.
And tell us what's going on in the stars right now, because it's been a lot, it feels like.
I am I'm so alive and I'm barely breathing. Well, right now it's funny because we're in a really karmic period. We're under a lot of not only a lot of retrogrades, but we just come out of an eclipse season. And so whenever we have astrological weather like this, we're kind of being met with a lot of shadow work, a lot of stuff that tends to make us uncomfortable, but we kind of need to go through in order to sort of grow and blossom into the more evolved versions of ourselves. So, and my therapist so beautifully put it as like, you're experiencing growing pains. And I'm like, I think that's kind of like the theme of what is going on in the sky right now. We have like Saturn and Uranus that are kind of like calling for a lot of honesty, a lot of discipline, and a lot of radical change within the way that we look at life and our perspective. So it's a lot. I am. How are you surviving it? If you
Yeah.
don't mind me asking.
Yeah. I'm feeling a lot. I'm just feeling a lot, and I'm
Yeah.
happy to be feeling it and not numbing it. So that's a good thing. And
Yes.
I'm just trying to flow with it. Yeah, it's like I feel a lot of resistance always during these times. I'm like, I don't want to just be with this. I want results. I want to do things like I don't want to be in this. So I'm just moving slow. That's been a big theme for me. Is like slow it down
Yes.
and trust in the timing, because I'm like, no, this is not how it's supposed to work out. I expected it this way. And it's like, no, that's not what's happening. So just
Yes.
noticing those things and being like, it's okay that it's not working out like you thought. And trust that something greater is coming and unfolding. And like, yeah, so it's a lot of surrendering.
Oh my gosh, that's exactly where I'm at. I saw do you know who like Leora Alexandra is? She's like this like law of attraction. She's this cool girl on YouTube, and she tweeted the other day about how she was having a lot of like period cramps, and her friends were like, "Just take an Advil," and she was like, "No, pain demands to be felt." And I was like, "That's literally me," because A, I never take an Advil or Tylenol from feeling
Same.
any cramps. Yeah, because I'm like, just have to naturally let it happen. Like, just let me, you know. But also, I feel like I try to I'm trying to look at my experience of right now through that same lens, because everything you said I'm feeling and I'm validating, because yes, it's like seeing things unfold in a way that is not how you step by step planned it, and finding the comfort in trusting it instead of trying to control it or fix it or heal through it. So it's yeah, it's like a me against me kind of thing. I'm like, are you going to be okay with this, doing its own thing? So same.
I think that's so beautiful that you also like experience pain. And let's talk more about that, because I just got a huge cut on my foot from
Yeah.
coral when I was on a trip, and I didn't want to put antibiotics on it. I didn't want it to put any, I've just been like letting it heal naturally. And everyone's like, what are you doing? It's going to get infected. And I was like, I watched it get a little infected, but I still just let it be. And I was like, it's okay. I trust my body. I know my body can heal.
Yeah.
And it took like, it's taken like over 2 weeks, and people are like, it could have healed so fast. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I just want it to happen naturally. And that's not something anyone is really told to do. And so maybe we can talk about that a little bit more.
I find so first of all, literally same, which is so crazy because I never relate to anyone on that. Like even like as minimal as like I genuinely do not take anything when I have
Same.
period cramps, and all my friends are like, literally why? And I'm like, just because there's something that is so freeing about trusting that your body knows what it's doing. And I feel like I think there are certain circumstances where you're like, okay, like maybe let's, find some help. But also I don't know. I feel like if the people before us were able to kind of like naturally navigate like life without needing to like numb it immediately, I think we can too. I think that there's some certain circumstances where you do need help, but otherwise I feel like those modalities are sort of just like, how can I make life as comfortable as possible immediately? And like, especially like you said about you could have healed quicker, right? Like, how can I get things done as quickly as possible instead of just kind of like moving slowly and letting things sort of mend themselves, and finding that you learn a lot about yourself when you move with pain instead of like trying to avoid it, you know? So yeah, I agree totally.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful process. And like, of course, there's
Yeah.
times when you need it, like that, of course. So I think like
Yeah.
allowing it first to just unfold naturally is such a beautiful process. And I find every time I surrender to that, like something beautiful happens. Like I was upset because I couldn't
Yeah.
go surfing, I couldn't go in the ocean for
Yeah.
literally a week, over 2 weeks. And I was like, this is what's being asked of me. And it taught me to like, I need to do things at the house. So I got my house organized. Like there's always something there.
Yeah, yeah. How is it now, by the way? Are you
It's
better at all?
it still looks pretty gnarly, but it's, like, at least
Like,
closed, so that's good.
okay, good. We love that.
Yeah, we love that. And so let's also chat about how to, be in the discomfort of life, and how to not wanna fix it.
Yeah, I am like viscerally learning that lesson right now. And I will say that I think it's challenged my need for control. I think that I find a lot of comfort, and embracing vulnerability has sort of challenged this for me, but I find a lot of comfort in like I am okay. Everyone thinks I'm okay. Everything is okay. So whenever something that, you know, challenges that belief or is uncomfortable happens, I'm like, how do I fix this immediately? How do I make sure that I am okay and that I like rationalize it. I find the lesson immediately. I find the perfect journaling prompt to like summarize it. Like how do I do all of the things immediately? Um, but sometimes when you do that, you don't even you miss the lessons because of how like hyper focused you are in like getting to the other side of it. And so today I did a practice where like I really like brought myself into a situation that brought me a lot of discomfort recently, and I just kind of sat with it. I didn't, you know, I just sat in it, and within that sitting I saw emotions I didn't even realize I was feeling, and it was really like heart opening and really healing for me. So I say all that to say that sometimes you evolve and you heal through things if you just look at them instead of trying to fix them. Sometimes they're fixed when you look at them,
Mhm.
which is so much easier said than done. But I'm
Yeah.
trying to do it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a big practice I've been incorporating too, and
Yeah.
it's so interesting, like, especially being so conscious and aware, we see the end, we know what like, we're like, "Oh, I don't need to feel through that, I know where I'm going," but it's, like, wrong, you actually
Yes.
have to, like even though we know the like, we know,
Yeah. Yes.
it's so interesting to just be in it and just allowing
Just
it so
allow 100%. I just do you ever I think especially like on this journey, I wonder like, do you ever want to turn the self-awareness off? 'Cause sometimes I'm like, I'm too aware of everything and like even knowing the end result, knowing that like, okay, this is for me, this is for my own growth. Like sometimes I'm like, I just want to be naive again, you know?
Yeah,
But
I was
that's
just saying that, yes, I agree, like, it would be nice to just switch it off sometimes because sometimes it's overwhelming, like, being so aware. Mm.
it's overwhelming sometimes for sure. But I think it's also the greatest gift. But I think in moments like that where you're like, okay, how do I make this as comfortable as possible? Sometimes like being comfortable means like not looking at it and you just have to look at it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yes, agree, and, um, so
Mhm.
how do you help people with that when they're really avoiding the truth? Like, I noticed I was even talking to a friend about this, like, she doesn't write down the truth in her journal sometimes, like, she's afraid to, like, even put it out there, and so, um, how do you help people,
That's
like,
so wild.
re
Yeah.
see the truth that they're in and not avoid it?
Wow, that's a beautiful question. I will say that I've experienced that as well. Like there were times where like even going to therapy, I wouldn't like there were some things that I wouldn't even admit to her. And I was like, if I can't admit it here, like where can I admit it? So I think one thing that I have implemented into my routine that's really helped me build a healthy relationship with honesty that I think is important for everyone to have is like every morning when I wake up, before I consume anything, before I consume social media or anything, I just kind of like have an immediate dialogue with my body. And I'm like, hey girl, where are you at? And it's one of those things where like I will ask myself, where am I holding emotional tension in my physical body? And a lot of the times it's the jaw and stuff. And I can kind of like from there build of like, okay, where's that coming from? And where's that coming from? And like what's you have no choice but to be met with the truth when you have an honest dialogue with like your physical vessel. And so I think implementing that more and more has really built this sense of like radical honesty with myself of like, okay, that's how I feel about it because I'm storing it here, or I'm harboring guilt about this thing because I feel like I acted on this insecurity, or just the more that you speak with yourself honestly, the more it becomes easier. And I think also the more that you embrace vulnerability, the harder it is to lie or to upkeep a facade, I would say, which is difficult, I think, within this like social media world of seeing people sort of like display their highlight reels and thinking that it doesn't reflect your like real visceral experience. But I think the more that you are honest out loud, the more others will feel permission to do the same. And then we can kind of shift the dialogue, and especially in terms of like how we show up on social media. So it's just finding the fact that like we're all battling some sort of truth, and knowing that you're within community is
Mhm.
really important. So it's
Yeah,
it's a journey for sure.
I agree. As soon as every time I'm honest, like it's pretty hard to not meet someone with honesty, especially when they're being vulnerable. It's like you almost feel guilty if you don't respond back with vulnerability.
Yes, which is it's like gotten me into, I mean, it's always better to be honest, which feels like a very like rudimentary concept, this thing of like, don't lie. But like it's so much more than that. I feel like there's such a weight that you take off of yourself when you just know that, and however people respond to it, I'm living in my truth. And that means the truth that I admit to myself first and foremost, but also like the way that I wear my skin. There was a lot of time where I didn't even like sort of live out loud that I was queer, right? I was like, maybe I'm a little bisexual, but like not at all. But like within me, like sort of allowing myself to admit to myself that I see humans so much more than their genders. That introduced me to a deeper part of who I am and my own identity. And I want to say that if there's any truth you're trying to conceal, it's so much more freeing to face it and face the consequence of facing it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think yeah, I'm trying to think like it's so important to have safe communities to be able to speak your truth too, because
Yeah.
it's hard when you're like, okay, I'm listening to these people and they're telling me to speak my truth, and then they go speak it and someone like just beats you up like immediately.
Yes.
It's like,
Yes.
oh, I don't want that for people either. So finding safe places where people don't judge you for your truth is so important. And
Yeah.
family
Really
isn't
feeling
that
like you're
sometimes,
safe.
and that's okay. Like it doesn't have to be your family.
Oh my God. And a lot of the times maybe it won't be. But there are so many safe spaces and so many communities if you just search for them. And I also will say that the more you live in your truth, the more you'll attract people that have that same truth.
Mhm.
So like I feel like the more I've just been more authentic in myself, I've like mirrored that, and the people that I found me, honestly, including you, are just like very much like, yeah, that makes sense, right? So just yeah, it's beautiful to know that you can create that community within radical honesty.
I agree. And it makes me
Mm.
so happy too. Like the more you are, the just easier life becomes. Like you said, things just magically attract you so fast. And I love watching that journey unfold. And it's like a big trust, but then yeah.
Yeah. A big trust, which is easier said than done, but
Yeah,
totally I agree.
always. And I love to hear about your journey about being queer.
Yeah. It was it was something that I think I always sort of like underlyingly knew, but I don't know. It wasn't so I went to college and I majored in multimedia journalism, and I minored in sociology. And so within studying sociology, I had to take a lot of like gender and sex courses, which is amazing. And it introduced me to this idea that like sexuality can be a spectrum, right? Because I always kind of saw it, and I think it was taught to me to be this like black and white thing. Like you're either gay or you're straight or you're bisexual. And I was like, well, I feel like I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. Like maybe I'm like 70% straight, like 30, And so being introduced to this idea of not only just like the spectrum of it, but like even what pansexuality is, and seeing people as energies more than like what they are, um, really allowed me to feel seen. I think in any shift in identity, you just have to feel seen in something. And so the minute I felt understood by a definition, um, and I felt like the room to explore it, and also like the community that I was able to find within it. Um, yeah, I just been met with more and more of me, you know. And I feel like sometimes we can have like this concept of ourselves, and we can get really married to that idea of ourselves, and then when we actually start to explore more and ask more questions, we meet deeper parts of ourselves. So yeah, I think I'm still being introduced to myself, but that is a large part of who I am that I'm grateful I now know.
Yeah, I love how you describe that too. It's like we think we know who we are, and then we meet people and we're like, wait, that's actually part of me too.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And like letting yourself blossom and like letting yourself continue to figure that out is really important, I think.
And how do you deal with like showing that to people in your life that have seen you in this one way and then like changing and being like, actually, I'm this? Like, how do you find that process?
That is, oh my God. Okay, interviewer. Okay, Jay Little. That is such a good question because it's something that I think not a lot of people, I think there's like this whole idea of like coming out to your family and all of that. But it's like even when there's such a shift, you know, like your sexuality is not just your sexuality. It has so much to do with your identity. So like that shift in self, how that presents to people who have known you intimately as something else is a weird thing to navigate. But I think um if they're really your people, they will see sort of like the freedom that gets unlocked when you are living in your authenticity. And I think if anything, it'll deepen your relationship. I think all of my friendships have now gone into a different level of intimacy and safety because of the fact that they're sort of like being met with a more vulnerable me.
I
So
get the
yeah.
chills when you said that. It's so beautiful.
It's something I didn't even realize until you like presented that question to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, it like was actually a journey, but a really important one.
And did you lose any relationships in that?
I I had some shifts to spaces that were a little bit more distant. I don't know if I lost anyone, but I will say that I think sometimes you can mirror things in other people that they're not prepared to look at. And so if you are kind of like radically in your truth and some people are still struggling with that, it can make them uncomfortable and it's not a reflection of you. It's kind of where they're at in their journey. So I think that maybe at some points has happened, but otherwise, no, I think I have really good people in my life. And so I've been able to, yeah, deepen my relationships for sure. Have you experienced that at all? Because I feel like you seem to be someone who is very, very, very just like organically true.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that at all sort of like makes people uncomfortable with the fact that they're like living under a facade.
All the time. Yeah, when you said that, it hit so deep in my heart. I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, like when people aren't ready to face their truth, like
Yeah.
I put them off because I'm just me and I'm just doing my thing. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, when people aren't ready. And of course, at first I like took that person, like, what did I do? Like, what is wrong with me? Like, I don't understand.
Right.
Like, I swear I never did anything to them. And then it's like,
You
oh,
did it.
they're just not ready to meet themselves and they're just not ready to see new depths of themselves and they don't know how to hold that for themselves, and that makes sense because no one's ever taught them how to hold these things. And
Right.
it's hard when like you've had this whole, when anytime you've had this belief and it gets shaken, you're like, well, what do I do? I've been attaching to this my whole life, like that can't be different. And like when that happens, I remember when it happened to myself, I'm like, ah. It's hard.
Yes, literally panic, emergency.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's such you worded that so beautifully in terms of like people just don't really know how to like hold themselves because they haven't been taught to. So all you can really do is A, like you mentioned, just like it's not personal, don't take it personally, and B, continue to live as out loud as you possibly can. And
Yeah.
just hope that within that they can find some sort of bravery.
And you're planting the seed always, like, I think that's what's so beautiful is like even if they're not ready right now, like it's in them and they're gonna start thinking about it for a while, and what happens will happen.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely, for
I
sure.
like to call it the glow up. Like as you start shining brighter and brighter, like it's exciting, but like you also lose people and you also like, you have to be okay with that process.
Yeah, and it illuminates different parts of like even the relationships that you have that maybe aren't like healthy or like dynamics, or you realize people that are kind of like draining you a bit more. It's like I don't know, growth I think is something that's like really there's a word I'm looking for, like glorified and but rightfully so, but it's also worth noting that like a lot of like pain and just there's a spectrum of emotion that comes with evolution, I'll
Mhm.
say.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I wrote a little blog post about that kind of recently because
Yeah.
I called it the glowing pains, but the growing pains, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, it's real and it's not talked about much because everyone's like, you want to get to this place, but there's a lot of shit that happens in between.
Yes. Oh my gosh, 100%. And I feel like sometimes something that I've been wrestling with is like letting myself mourn the loss of like the old me. And I feel like because we're so addicted to growth and to evolution, especially if you're in this work of like spirituality or anything, you can get so hyper focused on who you are becoming that you don't even give yourself permission to like bid farewell to the version of you that you're leaving. And I think oftentimes we can like villainize past versions of ourselves when you know those versions of ourselves carried us and got us here. So sometimes I have to mourn the loss of even like the things that I used to do that now I can't do, like spiritually. Like I don't know, like I can't even like watch certain like movies anymore, like scary movies, because I'm like it just I feel like it's like anchoring me. Like I have to mourn the loss of like even the naivety of that. So I still have to say that like there's so much shadow work. There's so much um like deconstruction of things you didn't even realize were trauma that you have to do if you do want to have that glow up. And it's not all rainbows and sunshine. But I don't know, it also can be. It's everything. It's like so many truths can exist at once. So it's not for the faint of heart, darling. I'll say that for sure.
Definitely. I
Yeah.
agree. And that's another important thing is like there's so many things happening at once. It's not just one emotion, one thing. It's like we
Oh.
have to hold so many things at once.
Yes. Yes.
It can be overwhelming for sure.
I think I think I'm also such a I'm just psychotic. And also that's like my favorite part of it though. Because I feel like a lot of people find such an attachment to like happiness and feeling good. But I feel like if we only experience that emotion, like who would we be or what would we be or how would we connect with people, right? Which is I think why you and I are so much like feel the pain, because I think that like as human beings, we are blessed to be able to experience such a spectrum of emotion that um like the emotions that come alongside this journey, which is like can be grief and anxiety and sadness and fear. I think we should feel that fully and completely and not be so attached to like happiness, because it's just one end of the spectrum of emotion. It's just one extreme that I think houses a lot of really beautiful things to feel that evidently will introduce us to deeper parts of ourselves. So I say all of that to say that the journeys can introduce you to a lot of different emotions, but I think that's the most beautiful part of it.
I
Ultimately.
agree. And I something we should talk about too is how people um live in suffering. And it's like this difference between like feeling
Yeah.
the emotion and just living in this like suffering state.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I was just having a conversation with someone about that because she was like, she had this like accountability partner for I think like some sort of gym routine, and she had to cut it off with her because of she was like, I'm someone who experiences problems just alongside everyone else, but I don't trip over my problems. And I was like, that's a really important distinction. I think that we should dance with discomfort. We should experience life, but we shouldn't let it drown us. And that is all, a matter of choice. I think what we can't control an experience, we can control on how we respond to it. And so choosing your perspective and choosing to go back to like the modalities that make you feel better, and being vulnerable within communities, I think is how you can navigate that without drowning under it. Because I think, yeah, like you were saying, also just like a lack mindset, like people can get really trapped in like the comfort of suffering, because it is comfortable to kind of stay with where you're at instead of being faced with like, maybe there's something I can do about it. So yeah, it's something that I have to like mirror to people a lot, because I'm like, listen, it's comfortable to stay there and I have to pull myself out of it as well. But um yeah, it's not gonna build anything.
Yeah, and sometimes we often like I didn't realize before that my home, my comfort was suffering. Like that was my normal. Like that's what I grew up with. Like
Yeah.
suffering was it for me. And so
Yeah.
knowing that like sometimes when they say like comfort zone, it's like Sometimes that's not true because your comfort zone could be shit.
Yes, literally. Yeah. And also just like first of all, everything you said, literally me. And also I realized that like also our beliefs about things, we have to challenge them sometimes because I feel like I grew up around I just watched a lot of stress accumulate around money and like finances and stuff. And so I feel like that trickled into how I experience or I like let myself experience money. Like I always thought like this is something that's always going to be difficult or, and so like recognizing that so much of your mindset plays a role in how you experience things. And so like shifting that and being deserving of it and shifting your dialogue is really important. So yeah, same, same.
Yay, love this. And
Mhm.
I see your big teddy bear behind you. I is that
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. Her name is Raja. We love her.
cute? Do you use that with your inner child healing or what is
Yes. Oh my God. Inner child healing is like, it's carried me throughout, I would say, like this first half of my 20s. But yeah, no, that's a huge part of my inner child. I also have like, I have a trampoline that like I bounce on a lot. I have a lot of different things around my whole room. In the front of my room, I have like a picture of me when I was maybe like 5, and I look at it relatively often just because I think it's really important to sort of like have just a connection with your inner child because that is never a part of you that really goes away. I think we think that like as we grow up, like that dies, and it really, really doesn't. And the older that you get, I think the more important it is for you to nurture and take care of your inner child, to have an honest dialogue with them as well. So I do as much as I can to make life as playful as possible. I think that inner child healing in a lot of ways is probably going to surface trauma. So it's something that should maybe be like held in a facilitated manner, right? Like go to therapy, go to counseling. But also like the lighthearted part of it is making sure that you're playing, making sure that you're working with like colors and creativity, and you're doing the things that maybe your inner child wanted to do but didn't have the permission to do. So I try to implement that. I also have like a coloring book next to me. Yeah, I keep her alive for sure.
same? I think play is one of the most important things and why not? It's so fun. Like who decided that we don't play as adults? Like I don't know who took that out, but
Is it difficult for you to play? Because I see that a lot for people.
no, I love
Right.
to play. And I've also been a nanny for 12 years, so like I think that like helped
That'll
me
help.
stay connected to it. And then it's like I used to actually I was thinking about this the other day. I used to be kind of serious when I was younger, like because I had to raise myself. And so like I took on this adult role and I
Mm,
didn't play
right.
enough when I was younger. And so I think that like when I finally realized like play is important, I just like full turned it on and like all my friends we always play and are so silly. And I have like a stuffy animal too. And like I love keeping the play around.
Yes. Okay, that makes me so happy because I know that like I think because we've been so conditioned to see life through the lens of productivity, like if I'm not being productive right now, I'm wasting my time, that it's much more difficult for people to let themselves play. So it's beautiful to hear. And I think that's why I see so much of myself in you of like, it's just like, why wouldn't you make life silly? Why wouldn't you like, how is play not productive? I feel like it's such a, it's an act of like the deconstruction of conditioning that we have to do in order to let ourselves go back to that space. But it's so important.
Yeah, I was gonna say you definitely have to like if you are someone who's resistant play, like who taught you that? Start learning like where did you learn that? Like start dissecting that for sure so you can tap back into it because it's so normal to feel guilty to play. It's so normal to not experience pleasure because we're not told to experience pleasure. So really just it's just a process of deconstructing for sure.
Yes. Oof, tea, girl. No, like 100. And it's, I think, like the journey of self or whatever this is. I feel like it's, I'm like, whatever I'm embarking on. It like, so much of it comes back to finding the roots of your beliefs and really asking yourself like does this stem from me or does this stem from what I've been shown, because you don't even realize how much of it is conditioning and how much of it is actually what you fundamentally believe. And so when you come back to like I'm going to actually live life for myself and create my own beliefs, it's so freeing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, it's so cool to like look at like, oh, this isn't my thought. Like this was put onto me. Like I can have a
Yeah.
different belief than that. And At first it's kind of scary, but like, but then once you realize like, and you start picking through all the things that are in you, it's like, wow, this is who I want to be.
Yes, this is who I want to be. I know that's, oh my God, that's, oh, what a beautiful way to put it. I think, yeah, I think life, sometimes we can get, attached to this idea that there's like something like sort of predestined that we're meant to become. And I think sometimes that puts a lot of like anxiety on every decision that you make. And so I think coming back to like, rather life can be the version of you that you end up as is something that you choose, right? Like you can choose who you're growing into rather than like, I have to figure it out what it is a lot more freeing and puts more power back into your hands to like assume your own beliefs and stuff.
Yeah, it all comes down to choice and reclaiming your power. My word of the year
Yeah.
has been power. And I've really been trying to do that more, like really trying to see, I give a lot of power away, like constantly. And so trying to reclaim that and fill my own cup up. And yeah, it's such a good process.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. I give a lot of my power away too. That's such a, do you know how, have you done anything to kind of like reel that back in at all that you can share with me?
Yeah, so reclaiming my power. So it's just noticing like emotions. That's like the biggest thing I've been working on, like putting it in other people's hands.
Yeah.
Like if this person doesn't hang out with me, then I'm not going to be okay. Or if he doesn't text me back, then my day is like not, that's not what I'm thinking, but like I
Yeah.
notice
Yeah.
myself like I'm in a low energy all day because of that situation instead of being like, I actually have the
Yes.
power to feel everything that I want to feel and it's not in anyone else's hands.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh. And isn't that so, I don't know, there's something that's so liberating about knowing that like it's up to me, really, and it has nothing to do with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and so yes, for me, it's just like noticing, like if I am whatever I'm feeling, just tracing it back. Like, where did this start? What made me feel this way, and how did I give my power away? And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
actually, I want to take that back. Even energy cutting. Like recently, I've been holding a lot of space for people too, so that are
Yeah.
going through some shit, and so I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, and I was
Yeah.
started to
Yeah.
carry it, and I was like, I
Yeah.
feel great in my life. Like, what's going on? I was like, oh wait, like I need to energetically cleanse myself. So doing like a cord cutting thing and just like putting like sending everyone's energy back and reclaiming my own was really helpful too.
Oh my gosh, that is, I don't do that enough.
Right?
Like I feel like
Same.
I only do that when I see myself in like a dire situation. And it's like that should be part of like your spiritual hygiene, like maintenance, like regularly. So
Yeah.
thank you for reminding me about that for sure.
Yeah, I need it too. Like I don't do it that often. And so it's something, especially being in this
Yeah.
work, that we need to do for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I always just like, I'll like wear like a tiger's eye crystal and I'm like, I'm protected, but I'm like, girl, you should probably do something more intentional.
Ooh, tell us what Tiger's Eye does.
Yeah, so tiger's eye is like one of my favorites in terms of like if you want to sort of have a barrier with your own energy and make sure that if you're walking into a space you're not carrying anything that isn't yours out with you. Tiger's eye and like tourmaline are the best ones for that. um and yeah, and it's something that it's just like a really empowering crystal. I feel like I also really connect with tigers in general, which clearly, so if there's anything that like has that implemented into it, I'm into it. But
What does it
yeah,
mean to you?
tigers, I think coming into my I always say that like I define myself by 4 different layers. So like my inner child, my sexual self, my higher self, and my shadow self. And so I think in terms of like outside of doing individual work for both of all of those layers, I'm really working on like the integration of them. So recently, especially, I've been like integrating what it means to like be this like vibrant and curious inner child and also be this like really sensual and sexual being that's like liberated in her body. So I don't know, tigers have really played a role in that for some reason. I think like symbolically, just like this idea of like um I am actively always choosing my power and choosing how I show up, and knowing that that looks like whatever I decided to be within that given moment is really liberating. And so tigers just mean that for me. And I don't even know if that has anything to do with like the symbolism of tigers, but that's just what they meant for me.
That's okay, and that's the beauty of life. Like, you can make anything is technically your own meaning. Like, even when you talk about success, I remember when I was in couples therapy, and she was
Yeah.
like, "I want both of you to define success," and we both had completely definitions, and we're
Yes,
all like
yes.
assuming we think the same, but we always have different definitions. So
Yes, and that's a beautiful one to have an individual definition for, because I think a lot of people suffer when they like abide by society's definition of success, and so when you have your own, it's a beautiful thing. But yeah, no, you're 100% right for sure.
I'm glad you
Viewing
found.
your own meaning behind things.
Yes. And I want to really quickly tap on too, like being sensual as a woman. Like, I've really tapped into this too. And like,
Yeah.
I've reclaimed my body and I feel like I love my body, but I still sometimes, like when I'm putting it out on social media or just like wearing what I want to wear, like working through that is so hard in this society.
Yeah.
What are some ways that you have been able to express your sensuality and work through the like pressures of society about what that means?
Oof. Oh my gosh. It's definitely, there's so many layers to this,
I know.
but it's an active journey. It comes back to, once again, like unprogramming a lot of the programming. So like what society has defined as sexual or sexuality, and like getting in tune with how I defined it. I think a lot of the times I thought I needed to like play a role or like be this version of myself that society deemed was like sexy, instead of like recognizing like maybe I feel sexy when I have like a Rugrats tee on, and like letting myself feel that way was really important. And also coming back to how I defined pleasure and making sure that I was experiencing that in every form, like in every way, sexually, sensually, intimately, physically. Like, am I making sure the pleasure is at the utmost priority? And am I voicing that? Am I making sure that I feel confident in saying what that means for me? And I don't know, I think it's important to make sure that like you have an honest conversation with yourself about who are you doing it for. I think when it comes to, I'm like very outward with my body, like I just show it all the time. And I think it was important for me to recognize, like, am I doing this in relationship to my own confidence, or am I doing this for validation? Am I doing this to appear as something that I'm not? Like, just really being honest with every single time that you show up in your body, and making sure that it's for you and that you're self-defining your worth and not placing that outward or externally. So it's like it's an emotional, mental, physical journey.
Yeah.
But it's also been the most liberating, because I think I confuse people a lot, because I think there's something about me that's so childlike. And I think they can kind of get thrown off when they're like, you're also like showing your like nipple prints online. And I'm like, I don't know how like so many truths can exist at once. And I choose to define sexuality in relationship to how I define it. So yeah, coming up with your own definition for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's like too is if you're sexual, you can't be playful, you can't be a yoga instructor, you can't be all these things. It's like
Yes.
that's what I struggle with the most, because like I'm like I like to show off my body, like I like my body, and I'm also like all these other things. And yeah,
Yes.
like the more we own all of that, the easier it is for
Right.
the people too as well. Because I thought I had to be all these strict things. Like if I was that, I couldn't be this. And so understanding that you can be all of it.
Yes, exactly. Which is, I don't know, it's weird, because sometimes I'm like, should I censor myself more? But I'm also like, why? What is that for? Like, who is that for? And why would I ever, shrink myself to keep anyone else comfortable? Um, so it's a constant dialogue, and I'm sure it'll shift the more that I shift. But for right now, it feels so liberating to feel good in my skin, and however that skin shows up, right? Because I have days where I feel like the most like strong and lean and healthy, and the other days where I'm like, I'm so bloated, I'm so gross, and I'm so mean to myself and hypercritical in those days. And so making sure that no matter how I show up, I'm putting on a crop top was really important for me as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And how do you deal with like men that are like vultures?
Oh
And
God, they're
I
everywhere.
struggle with that because I'm like, I walk out the house. I'm like, "Ooh, yeah, you're looking good, girl." And I'm like, I am so excited to just wear this outfit. And then immediately it's like, all these vultures come out. I'm like, no, that's not. I'm not doing this for you. Like, this is not for you.
Yes, yes. I think, well, that's exactly it. I think making it so like loudly clear that this is not for you is like how I've been able to liberate myself from that. I think it really bothers me when people feel entitled to you. So like I think men especially can feel like if you show up in any way that's even remotely suggestive, that gives them permission to feel entitled or to say something or to feel a sense of like, I don't know, just like access to you because of the fact that you've like put yourself out there. And so um I think it's something that like will always just be shitty and be annoying to have to deal with. But for me, I think I'm really out loud with the fact that like my body is mine and every way that I show up in it is for me. And I hope that that message resonates with whoever is like awake enough to read it. But you're always gonna have like those vultures, like you said, and it's just something that's just annoying and upsetting. And I don't know. I think it's calling back your energy and knowing that like no matter how I'm received, I'm not gonna let that dim my relationship with my own confidence right now. So yeah.
And I think the more women that stand in that, the it'll start to decrease for those people that treat you in that way and feel like they have access to you and stuff. Because the more of us that feel
Yeah.
the same, like our confidence and that, like I think it'll shift. I believe. I still
I
believe.
believe so too. I think do you feel like you're seeing it a little bit? I feel like the narrative is shifting a little bit.
Yeah.
So hopefully it continues to. Like even just like the fact, like it amazes me to see that like that like revenge porn is something that holds up in court now because I remember when that was not a thing at all. Like if someone were to share like intimate photos of you, it was kind of just like your issue. But now the fact that that's like something that's like legally protected, I think it's the most beautiful thing. And it shows that we are going into a space where women are allowed to have autonomy and allowed to have like permission to sort of be their own self-government over their bodies. So yeah, I think we're going towards there for sure.
Yes, more of that, please.
See, honey.
Amazing. This has been such a good conversation. And how can my audience find you
Oh my God. Well,
and share
first
any
and foremost,
services you have?
yes, I'm so grateful that you had me on. This was such a organic and like easy conversation. So thank you for being who you are and for feeling safe. And yeah, thank you. My name is Jazmin Kylene, so you can find me on Instagram, JazminKylene. And you can book a one-on-one with me. I do like weekly sessions for different outlets. You can find that all in my bio. And I also do like YouTube videos and stuff like that. I have a newsletter you can sign up for. All of it is in the Instagram. So if you want to find me there, you can.
Amazing. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you.